Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Aviv Grafi. Aviv is the founder and CTO at Votiro, which is an award-winning cybersecurity company specializing in proactively securing incoming data. In other words, it delivers safe content to users and apps at the speed of business. Aviv has a background in the Israeli military elite intelligence unit and brings his expertise in network security and vulnerability research to protect against malware and ransomware. So Aviv, thank you for joining us today for our Risk Management Show episode.
Thank you very much, boys, for inviting me. And of course, it's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So let's start, Aviv. Could you tell us a short story about your career path, what brought you to where you are right now, and what you guys at Votiro are up to these days?
Yes, sure. So I'm based in Israel, near Tel Aviv. I grew up in Israel, and one of the things I did as a teenager, I was very curious about cybersecurity. Back then, it wasn't really called cybersecurity, right? It was just called IT, and then IT security. And one of the things that I was passionate about is how things are working, and that led me to security research career and hacking. And I was recruited to the intelligence forces in Israel. I spent 4 or 5 years in actually mostly working on offensive and defensive operations and systems. And that taught me a lot of great things that in fact, everything is possible and nothing is impossible. Which later on, I was working for a couple of startups, and I thought I want to have my own business. I wanted to really do something like meaningful. And then when I actually established the business, that was a different thing, not what I'm doing today. And I found that actually, in order to keep myself for a living, I was doing penetration testing, audits, security audits for companies. And I realized that there is, while I'm going to clients and customers and talking with the IT teams, I was hearing the exact same thing. I was hearing that they concern between the tension of security and productivity, because they all know that employees need to do their job, but at the same time, they actually have that risk of them opening, for example, a malicious document. And in fact, one of the things that I was doing, I was demonstrating to my clients how I could hack them pretty easily. Is just opening the website of the client and saying, okay, what are the open positions there, and then sending just a weaponized PDF that looks like a resume, and saying, hey, I want to apply to a job in your company, and my name is Aviv. I know Boris from the risk management team, and please, give me a call. I would be happy to provide some references. And on the other side, there is a guy or lady that need to do their job, right? They need to open hundreds of resumes a week. And it was just working 100% of the times. And that led me to think really how we solve that problem between the security and productivity.
Fantastic. Yeah, so it's great introduction. So now I believe that we will have a very thoughtful conversation on the topic of how to secure your incoming data and why companies should invest in industry-leading preventive technology for their businesses. So let's discuss what is preventive technology that you kind of represent and you major want to talk about, and how does it differ from reactive approaches in business?
Okay, so the reactive approach in security and in business means once we know that something happened, then we would try, for example, to measure the damage, contain the risk, understand how we react. In cybersecurity, usually that would also include some damage. If, for example, an employee opened a malicious document, his endpoint may be infected. So maybe that's something that we can contain. Maybe we need to replace his endpoint. Maybe he's a remote employee. So that would be costly. Maybe the time that actually worked and now it cannot work, maybe that would costly, but sometimes actually bigger than that. It can be like some of the other colleagues are being infected with the same malware. Maybe some data is being encrypted, or maybe ransomware is installed. But at that point, we're only reacting. We only have to say, okay, something bad happened. Now let's react. Now, a lot of the security solutions are reactive. For example, monitoring solution. Let's try to find bad stuff that may be in his mailbox. Let's try to find something bad stuff on the endpoint. Let's see what permissions, what IT access permissions maybe someone now has and it shouldn't be having. Most of those solutions are reactive and they're great, but as the IT security world is evolving, reactive or detection is just the first step. And most of, at least the customers that I'm talking with, they really want to have something that's more preventive. They want to have a solution that they don't need to run after alerts all day. They don't want to sit to have a security operations center team that now need to scan, hundreds, maybe thousands of alerts per day, and they need to put a threshold saying, this is something that I should take a look into. And some of those alerts, if you're not into those alerts today, maybe tomorrow the damage will be bigger. So I think that if you think about prevention approach, it's way, way better because it doesn't rely on the speed of the human. It doesn't rely on the employee or the team availability. So that's how why we think that prevention is a more modern approach to security.
Mm-hmm. So what are some key examples of current preventive technologies that you can say what maybe some people working with them, but they don't know that they are working with them?
Sure. So, for example, a lot of the zero trust security approach in the cloud, for example, saying that by default we won't allow any access to resource unless someone would ask for. Okay, and once someone asks for an access, it will be limited for a certain amount of days. So we won't be saying, okay, let's monitor who has access to this resource and maybe find some anomalies or some differences, or maybe wait for the annual audit to review all the permissions. If we can actually, and some of the business cannot do that, I know, but if we can have a solution like with a zero trust approach, saying by default everything is relatively tight, and then open it by according to the need, that would be more preventive. This is one. A second approach would be endpoint solutions that we all know, for example, the EDR, the endpoint detection and response, that's saying if we detect something bad, we would unplug that endpoint from the network, or maybe revoke some permission because something bad has happened. Some of those solutions are aggressive. It's very important to know how to apply those, but this is more preventive approach. And of course, there's some others that's more related to data and content, as what we do in Votiro.
Yeah, of course. With regards to zero trust approach, I think we have about 3 or 5 and previous speakers on our podcast. Could you perhaps explain what Votiro precisely improves in this approach?
Sure. So zero trust started from the network area, saying we are not trusting anyone that actually wants to access a certain network resource. Then it expanded itself for the identity area. So now we want to make sure that not just the network access, but also the identity are being monitored, and by default it's being closed unless it's being otherwise defined. Votiro extended that zero trust approach to data and content. In fact, if you think about that, when you receive an attachment by email or you're sending something that is sensitive, the zero trust approach doesn't really, deal with that. It only deals with the access and the identity. But once you have, as Boris, you have access to certain sharing, let's say file sharing, like Dropbox or Box, that's it. You can access anything there, right? You can upload malicious document. So we actually expanded the zero trust approach to data and content. And the way we look at that as a preventive security company, we're saying, if I'm sending you, Boris, now a PowerPoint document, and now you have access because you are eligible and legitimate access to that document, it might contain malware. But if Votiro and what we do in Votiro is we call it content disarm and reconstruction, we're taking that PowerPoint document and we actually reconstructing it from scratch, saying these are the elements that should be in a PowerPoint document, and these are the elements that shouldn't be in a PowerPoint document. And then we deliver a safe copy, a safe replica that feels exactly the same as the original. is actually zero trust, because anything that shouldn't be there is just being left outside and be kept outside your mailbox. So you can practically open any document you want without the need to think twice, exactly like the HR guy or lady that I shared their story earlier. They can just screen all those resumes without the need to really think whether this is a malware or not. And this is the zero trust for content security.
Fantastic. So if we, for example, if we take the life of our average risk manager or CISO, if there is one thing that they should start prioritize right now that they are not doing, what would it be?
So I would say the first thing is to understand all the client-facing applications. A lot of companies, especially during and after COVID, they moved to have digital applications that allow clients to upload documents from outside. I can upload documents towards my insurance provider or my bank. And a lot of those solutions, they're not really scanning or not making sure that all those uploaded documents are safe. If you remember, we used to have mostly email and maybe web downloads. But now we have client-facing applications. We have Slack, we have Box, we have SharePoint, we have OneDrive, Dropbox, we have WhatsApp sharing.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
a lot of those channels are not being secured. And we think that the first thing need to be done is to map all those new access vectors. And on top of the email and the web, that a lot of the content is being consumed and really pose some business risk. Because if my insurance company would receive a malware from one of the clients, that will be a significant risk to them, because that's exactly on the critical business path. And we at Votiro provide solutions to all those vectors, making sure that only safe content is being imported into the organization and can be safely opened.
All right. So I would like to ask you a personal point of view. For example, what is the major misconception in the cybersecurity or your specific space, like malware or protection, that you kind of strongly disagree with?
So I think there's one thing that we hearing is that the anti-malware and the detection solutions are enough. In fact, we see, and probably the experienced security officers, they know the detection solutions are really late in the game. They can detect risk only days and weeks after that malware is being introduced into the organization. A lot of them are, acting from compliance standpoint, which is completely fine, which installing off-the-shelf standard security solution like anti-malware. But we understand as the bad guys are not sitting and waiting, and the detection solutions are just, late. We understand that the proactive approach need to be taken, and some of those companies still think that detection is fine until they're getting, they realize that it's not. But it's important to understand that.
So what are the most significant barriers or challenges business might face when implementing those preventive technology, and how can they overcome them?
So I think the number one challenge is that no one wants to impact the business, and they have that conception that preventive solution may stop some business processes. I encourage all the viewers and listeners to pick a solution that does not interfere with the business. In fact, I strongly believe that security solutions can be business enablers, and there are techniques to implement preventive solutions, first in monitoring mode, then actually gradually applying the policies, so it can be really go along with the business direction and shouldn't be affecting or disrupting the business. I think security should serve the business, not being the cop or the bad guy when you're coming into a business meeting.
So if you can you provide real world examples of companies that have successfully integrated such a preventive technology and the results, maybe without naming just maybe some industry or something like this?
Yeah, so I can give an example of one of the insurance companies that we protect in the US. That's fairly large companies, like more than 50,000 users. And one of the things that, I mean, they had the traditional security, they had the best security they could afford as a big enterprise. But one of the things they haven't thought about is that maybe one of their partners would getting hacked. So a law firm that was working with that insurance company, one of the mailboxes got breached, and someone actually took over that one of the lawyers' mailbox, and it just scrolled through the discussion, through the threads, and he took one of the discussions that he saw that that law firm communicated with the insurance company, and he just hit reply and say, hey, here is the draft of the contract that I promised you, and see the attached file.
No.
Now, the guy in the insurance company, you would ask them the regular question, right? Do you know that sender? Of course I know the sender because I'm communicating with her every other day. Okay, have you expected the document? Yes, of course, I'm waiting for the contract draft. So obviously he opened that attachment. So all those awareness training, phishing campaigns, the traditional solution just getting bypassed because you cannot really, tweak the human factor and tell them, okay, you need to stop that. And fortunately, the insurance company had Votiro installed, so we could actually reconstruct that attachment, that Word document that originally had a malicious macro in it, and we were able to deliver a safe version of that malicious contract into the mailbox. So when you open that item, nothing bad has happened. We provided the intelligence for the security team and told them, look, originally there was something bad in it. And so the security team actually told us, look, we don't need to run after that employee that actually was based in Portugal and now trying to tell them, okay, how we wipe your endpoint, how we actually getting you back into the IT operation because it was just safe. He opened the document, but nothing bad has happened. So I think that's actually demonstrate that thing with that tension between security and productivity and why a proactive approach is way more efficient than just a detection and reactive one.
Yeah, interesting example, because we also discussed on our community and also on the podcast what called third-party risk, because now with all this multiplying partners and everything is connected automatically, it's all kind of multiplied risk. So maybe can you discuss are there any emerging trends or technologies that impact in the field, and how do these trends influence the way organizations approach secure cybersecurity?
Yeah, so we see that a lot of organizations are not they now mapping the new way of working remotely. So if we used to have email, now we see a lot of companies communicating via Microsoft Teams and Slack, and that poses a significant risk. If you know, in the past, like maybe 10 years ago, the risk officer or the CISO would say, in our organization, you cannot use Slack. Today, they cannot do that, and they cannot. And we see actually Slack, Teams, SharePoint Box being shared across organizations. So when I'm getting like a new deck from my marketing vendor, they're sharing that via Dropbox or Box. And not a lot of organizations are being, towards protecting those new ways of getting content into the organization. And we found that as a significant trend. We know that, for example, like that was two weeks ago that Microsoft shared that there is a technique to actually hack via Teams and send a malicious document. And that was like one of the proofs that the bad guys are doing that. So they are trying to use that weak link in the communication channel to get into those organizations and doing that damage. So we're seeing a lot of movement towards those kind of communication channels.
Fantastic. So if we summarize our interview, if someone who is listening to it would like to walk away with one or two major takeaways, what would it be?
So I would say think about prevention-based security technology and being proactive. This is one. And the second thing is that pick a technology that is business enabler. You shouldn't be the one that actually being the bad guy in the room. You should enable the business and ask your vendor about how they can help you with that, because that's definitely doable.
Fantastic. So these were all my questions. Perhaps if I forgot to ask you something that you think it will benefit our audience, please go ahead, Aviv.
Yeah, so sure. So I love chatting with risk and security officers and personnel. So feel free to reach out to me directly by LinkedIn, Aviv Grafi. I would love to chat with you and hear your opinion and your challenges. I think there's no better way to communicate in the community than just having that peer-to-peer interaction. And of course, if you'd love to hear more, just go to our website, votiro.com. We have the solution as a SaaS service. And of course, one of our specialists would love to demonstrate to you. And of course, hear your feedback.
All right. Thank you. Great, great. Many thanks. And I wish you and you guys great success in penetrating the market. And perhaps in the future, we can have another discussion on another topic with you or your colleagues.
Thank you very much, Boris, for inviting me. Thank you.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.